Okay, we're now live. I'm recording, and welcome everybody. So I'm Lee Whitmore. I'm the Executive Director for the Grammy Music Education Coalition, and I am so grateful and glad that you all can join today. Again, if you're not up and speaking, do remember to mute your mic, and also remember if you forget or unmute, our staff will go in and mute you, and then if you have a question later, you're going to have to physically unmute. That's how the operating system works here, or the platform. So Lee Whitmore from the Grammy Music Education Coalition, which we have a singular goal as a coalition, and that's to bridge the equity, bridge the equity and access gap, and to ensure that as many as possible, all students in the United States in public schools, with a particular focus on underserved students, get music, get to make music and learn about music every day in school. That's what we do, and we are today a coalition of more than 70 organizations. And our guest speakers and panelists here in our first The Hub virtual town hall, we will do a series of these, are all connected to the coalition. Some of them were in the room when the initial conversation happened about 3 years ago about launching this organization and pulling everybody together under the mission. And gracious, it's just so good to have our special guests here today. I was having a wonderful conversation with the Grammy Music Education Coalition Board and our board chair, Tarek Ward, who is at Elma Philanthropies. Hi, Tarek. I see that you joined the session. The conversation was this. We're in the process of looking at what the next 3 years look like. We're just about 3 years old. And we built a plan. And we were thinking about what we'll do with schools and opportunities to grow and provide more active support to our coalition members and affiliates and just get into our next cycle. And Tarek and I were talking, and he said to me, you know, Lee, the thing is, all of the assumptions for the next 3 years for schools, for students, for teachers, for our community have kind of gone out the window for the time being, right? I'm home, you're all probably at home, and we have a different reality to deal with every day, as do our students. So in the conversation, I came out and I said, gosh, let's have a town hall and a conversation about not just and everybody here that you're going to hear from today, and many of our coalition members have resources and have extended opportunities or services for kids, for teachers, for community to do some learning and exchange music online. But there's this next piece of it, and I thank Tarek for this, and that's okay, let's say we're all opening school buildings again, and our students and teachers are back in the buildings next year. It's going to be different than it ever has been before. So that's the topic of focus today. And I'm super grateful. We have, and I'll just quickly list our participants. We have Mary Luehrsen, who's a dear friend. All the four panelists I've known them for many, many years. Mary Luehrsen, who is the executive director for the NAMM Foundation, the National Association of Music Merchants. We have also on Henry Donohue, who is the executive director for the Save the Music Foundation. We have Bob Morrison, who does a variety of things, including he's the head of Quadrant Arts Education Research. And we have Jeff Smith, who's the executive director for arts in the Metro Nashville Public Schools, one of the coalition's two pilot school districts with which we've started our work over the last few years. So enough from me. Again, just quickly, you got a couple tabs in the upper right-hand corner of your interface, likely one for people, one for chat. Feel free to use the chat room. Please remember, if you're not muted, to do so. And if we happen to mute you because you're not, if you want to speak and ask questions later, you'll simply have to unmute yourself. That those commands are in the bottom of the screen. And also, do ask questions, because we will use the questions that you offer up in the chat. And Lenore, Lauren on my team, and I will take a look at those, and they'll help for the conversational portion of this webinar and virtual town hall toward the end of the session. So great to have you all here, and I'm so happy that Mary Luehrsen at the NAMM Foundation, the NAMM Foundation offered to kick off and start the conversation. So Mary, I'm going to turn it over to you, and thanks for being here.
Lee, thank you so much for gathering us together, and to the Grammy Music Education Coalition, and great to see the fellow panelists and the names that were popping up here. First of all, very heartfelt thanks for all that you are doing collectively, individually, and collectively to sustain this time for music makers, music lovers, music education teachers, music learners. It's really so important that we have these conversations. I first want to tell you what I've been hearing. What I've been hearing through our network. I hear that there is lots of practicing. And when I have confidence that that's true because of the various people that I'm hearing from it, from our NAMM members who are renting instruments to schools and families, that are replacing instruments that were left in school and leaving them on front doors so kids have instruments in communities everywhere. The time that students are having because they are at home and they're figuring out this distance learning reality, their instruments in their life with music is really a stabilizing factor for them. I'm hearing this really dramatically. I know we're talking about social emotional realities as well. I think there's a tremendous amount of innovation happening with teaching and learning. Students are taking to it. Teachers who are a little bit older usually are taking it to it gradually, but teachers of all ages have jumped into the online teaching. And I'm also hearing that it's been just that connection to students and the connection to the process of learning repertoire, being engaged with learning is really important. There's, we are by nature, maybe we've taken it for granted that we can, before this time, we were so fluid with our connections and fluid with meeting. I mean, I've been on airplanes for 20 years, right? I mean, we're so much engaged with one another that we are connecting in really unique ways online, and we value it highly. So, and that there's just a tremendous amount of creativity going on out there, and it's bubbling up now faster and faster and faster. I feel that we went out of the gate really fast, and I want to share some resources. We went out of the gate really fast with our webinar, pretty much right when the whole schools were being closed and businesses were being closed. I'm in New York, I'm in the epicenter, so maybe the urgency was pretty direct with me. But we did our teaching and learning music online, and we had 16,000 registrants, and we had 5,000 participants on the webinar, and that's available as a recording. And then we did a frequently asked questions document because people were literally jumping into the reality. We followed up with another webinar on online private lessons, and we had NAMM members that had studio lessons that literally overnight went from in-store to online, and that we kind of shared those stories with everyone, and that had a lot of relevance to our education audience. And then tomorrow we're having another webinar on ensembles online. And this was that's at 4 o'clock, I believe, Eastern. That was one of the biggest hurdles about ensemble music education that many teachers were facing. And we're going to address it in this webinar tomorrow. We record everything. It's all open source. We want people to really actively pull this information down. So I wanted to share that with you. Yesterday,
Mary,
yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. Where can folks go if they want to find out? Where we'll publish it in the coalition socials. Go
right to nammfoundation.org, and then there's a tile right in the home page that will take you right to the resources. Okay, and if you have problems, I know people that can help you get there. So. I just wanted to say something about the conversations that are also happening around education writ large. This is my policy hat. I'm also Director of Public Affairs, Government Relations for NAMM, and we've been way on the front lines of interpreting and disseminating information about the relief resources, which I do want to remind you all, if you are a nonprofit organization, you are eligible to receive and to apply for the relief funds that are available through the Small Business Administration. Lots of information on our NAMM.org website under Issues and Advocacy. And our NAMM members are applying for these loans, and they are rehiring their employees. I mean, this how and a nonprofit has these same options. So I want to be sure that's that information. But yesterday we also announced at a soft launch of our Best Communities for Music Education program. About 780 school districts got the award. About 140 independent schools themselves got the Support Music Merit Award, and we've got it in 24 hours. People needed this good news. You know, they needed a reminder that they were together as a district. I see Jeff. Thank you. We've been monitoring your social media. Metro Nashville received the award, and you know, it just seemed like a piece of good news that people were really eager to hear. But from what I'm hearing in terms of education writ large, you know, the education thinkers, the philosophers, the administrators, the forward-looking, what education needs to look like in the 21st century are starting to write about this and communicate about this, that this moment could really change education a lot. And I think the message that we have on the music education side is we need to be listening and paying attention. And we need to be fluid and nimble through this process. And I think the part of that reality is that there's this experience that students are having around individualized learning. They are adjusting to the requirements of the format of a class and the requirement and the marching in time towards an assignment or getting basic information, and then they're uploading and they are getting maybe more individualized responses when the Zoom class isn't meeting. I know it's not Zoom anymore for a lot of places, but when the group classes are happening where there is internet access, and all we know that about these digital divide realities that are also being, you know, addressed, maybe probably not fast enough like everything else, but that we have to understand that this has the potential to change music education as well. And when I worked with music educators around, especially with the ensemble instructors, you know, the challenge was, well, what can you also expand for their music learning that will make that ensemble even so much greater when it comes back together? So I posed these for instances. What if you had an entire, you know, really top-notch ensemble, whatever, jazz band, orchestra, whatever it is, mariachi, and you did an online ear training or sights reading program with them, which you kind of never really do in an ensemble, but you use this time to do that, who that ensemble would be when they came back together. In other words, I think to have that skill set and that music literacy skill set, I think it's allowing teachers to think different also, allow teachers to think more creatively. So they're going to come back with that desire to do more. And I think if I would sort of start to wrap up here, the concern that I have and the work that we need to do as the collective advocacy group, we know that in the third CARES Act, federal relief fund known as the CARES Act, there was significant funding for education that was going to be passed to our State Department of Education. So this was really good news, because when that pressure valve was released a little bit because people aren't buying, there's no state sales tax, the state coffers that are contributing to support education in general are going to be strained, but the relief funds are there and going to help to buffet that. Well, that means that there is potentially more manageable pressure on school district budgets and the way they're going to make choices around music education and arts education and other. I mean, it's just a trickle down, right? I mean, it's the pressure as well as the funding. The pressure is more trickle up if those funds aren't available on the district level. And the other thing that we're not going to have this spring is this remarkable rallying experience when you have these school-wide concerts and these school-wide festivals and these district-wide honors ensembles and these kids going off and performing in groups and coming back. It's not going to take place this spring, and graduations with beautiful ensembles and soloists and all the things that are happening. And there too, there's some great innovation happening there around these virtual festivals and virtual celebrations. But as advocates on the ground, wherever we're working, we have to make sure that the powers that be that are in charge of these school budgets do not chip away at the support for music education programs. I mean, that we're kind of back to some good old-fashioned advocacy 101 on that. And we all need to go back to that grindstone a little bit, or that flywheel, and make sure that that support is there. Because the people that don't know the deeper reasons why music education is so important, and if the spring concert isn't there to remind them, we have to be there to remind them. So, and I know some of the things that the Grammy Music Education is going to do in terms of the artists, messages from the artists. You know, we've talked to Country Music Association folks too about helping us with, you know, the messaging from the artist community. We gotta remember that that message is important too. So that's kind of the only notes I had for you today, Lee.
Those are awesome. What a great kickoff. And
that's a reasonable start.
So much valuable information, and I see folks chatting on the side. It's bringing up a lot of things for everyone that I think resonate. So thank you so much, Mary. And now I'm very pleased to lean to our second speaker, who is Henry Donohue, the Executive Director for the Save the Music Foundation. Henry, you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you. Thank you, Lee.
Fantastic.
Thank you. And thank you, Mary and Jeff and Bob and everybody on the call. Yeah, I think that from our perspective, so Save the Music, our program team has been really digging in and talking to, you know, hundreds of teachers across dozens of school districts, mostly Title I schools that make up our universe of grantees all across the country. And I want to echo what Mary said. We're really seeing heroic efforts from music teachers who were given very little notice, you know, sometimes a day's notice or a week's notice to prepare to teach the rest of the semester in a completely different way than they've ever taught. And I saw Frank Mankos join the call. We had one of our teachers in South Philly, Courtney Powers. She got permission from her principal to go into South Philly High School, pull out and fill her car with instruments that had been in her classroom, and she drove around the neighborhood giving the instruments to the kids to use at home. So synthesizers and keyboards and other instruments, and just the pictures of the kids, you know, standing in their doorways 15 feet away from where she's taking the picture, you know, are inspiring and heartbreaking at the same time. So yeah, we're a couple of notes on what we're seeing out there, what's working, and then you know, what we see the impact being going forward. So from our perspective, there's really no common technology baseline or common platform that people are using across the board out there in K through 12 schools. This is a period of rapid improvisation and experimentation, and I think Jeff is going to touch on this a little bit. There's a real digital divide. And so our schools and teachers can't assume that their student is going to have a quiet place at home with their own device, good Wi-Fi, and the ability to sort of concentrate, you know, on a self-directed lesson. So we're seeing everything from people distributing paper packets of assignments. We're seeing that in some districts, all the way through, you know, to these virtual choirs, you know, that people are putting together and you see online and in other districts. Courtney, the South Philly teacher I talked about, she's doing her classes now that the kids have the instruments on Instagram Live, which is something that I'm going to touch on in terms of platforms. But we're seeing a very wide variety of experiences, a lot of improvisation and experimentation, and, you know, participation rates ranging from below 50%. I know there's some big school districts out there where, because they can see how many of the kids are logging into the systems and participating in the classes, from low participation to very, very high participation. So what's working out there? So one other thing we're seeing is obviously there's a difference between if you're a elementary school teacher versus a middle or high school teacher and the ability to engage with students online. We're definitely seeing that elementary teacher and teachers who are engaging with students with special needs is much more of a sort of a one-way communication where they're producing content or videos of them singing songs or sort of leading lessons. And then it's really incumbent on the parent in a lot of cases to be a partner with the teacher in teaching those younger kids. So we're seeing a lot of demand and challenges on that side as well. So in terms of what's working, so at Save the Music, we really tried to dig in very quickly and just push out as much useful, free content in terms of remote music teaching and learning to our teachers and to our students in our schools as rapidly as possible. I think we have almost 75 resources on the site now, if you go to savethemusic.org, and we're continually working with partners to make things free, extend their free periods, make things lower barrier in terms of getting online. If you're a teacher on this call and you want to know about additional free resources, you should reach out to us through the site. But the overall message is simpler is better. And so where we've seen feedback from teachers on really what's working for them, it's things like Chrome Lab. So Google Chrome, popular platform, a lot of districts, Chromebook is the operating system that people are on. Google Chrome Lab is a very low barrier, easy to use, easy to get up online platform. We're hearing from teachers about the challenges of teaching music, but also teaching people to use a piece of software. And so we want things to be free. We want them to be accessible and shareable in the cloud. We want them to be easily used across platforms, and particularly on your phone. We know that a lot of students don't have laptops, but almost every student has a phone. And so, we're hearing good things, for instance, about Soundtrap. If people haven't used Soundtrap, it's owned by Spotify. For our music technology students, and that music technology program at Save the Music has grown quite a bit over the past 3 years. Soundtrap is a really easy to learn, easy to get going platform for digital audio workstation to get going. And so to the extent that you could deliver instruction and do the exercise on your phone, that's a huge benefit to teachers in these schools. We're also seeing that teachers are having success with, I don't know if we call it music appreciation anymore, but just say assignments where they're telling students to go and engage with a piece of music or performance and then come back, watch it or listen to it on YouTube on their own time. Again, so YouTube is a platform, everybody has it, everybody uses it. And so that's a behavior that students are used to doing. So an assignment that asks a student to watch a performance on YouTube and then come back, in the virtual classroom environment to work on it has been, that seems to be working for people. So going forward, when school comes back in the fall, and we're actually seeing good positive feedback that school should be returning in the fall each day a little bit at a time. I really think there's two things. One is, again, to the extent that people have really dug in and had this crash course in technology and music technology and using software as a teaching tool in music, we see that these bigger platforms, Chrome Lab, GarageBand, Soundtrap, that are easy to use and usable across devices and technology setups, that's where we see sort of the growth and adoption happening. And the other thing, and I know that Bob and Jeff are going to talk about this, we talk a lot about when students get back to school in the fall, they'll have just gone through a very weird and traumatic 6 months. And so, you know, we're really starting to introduce into that conversation, what kind of schools do we want students to come back to? You know, and having music in the school seems more important to me than ever as a tool to sort of process and express yourself and sort of deal with, again, what's been, for most people, you know, going to have been a very sort of weird and, you know, potentially traumatic time.
Fantastic, Henry. Those were really thoughtful remarks, and it's great to hear the connection to all the districts and folks that you at Save the Music Foundation work with. Really wonderful. Thank you for being here. And next, we're going to pivot to our good friend, Bob Morrison at Quadrant Education Research, who has a very broad view on what's happening with school systems around the country as well, for music and for the arts. And so, Bob, I'm going to pass the baton over to you. Are you there?
Great. Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Fantastic. Yes, all good.
Great. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Lee. And it's good to be on the panel with Mary, Jeff, and Henry to talk to you today. Most of you are probably familiar with the fact that, you know, at Quadrant Research, we do the Arts Education Data Project nationally, gathering data and making the data visible for folks. And certainly in this environment and coming out of this environment, data is going to be very important. We're going to need to know what is the impact going to be from what we're going through right now. What does participation rates and program offerings look like a year from now versus what we had before? And that's important, but I don't want to spend our limited time talking about data because what's going on right now, and I think this is really important to understand, that this is not normal. It's not normal for you. It's not normal for me. It's not normal for our students, our teachers, our administrators, our parents. And what we are going through right now is going to alter education in this country, if not around the world, in very meaningful ways as we come out of it. But one of the things that you have to understand is, and Henry touched on this, is, you know, our students are going through a traumatic process right now. They miss their teachers. I see this in my role as a school board member and working with other school districts around the country. What we hear from parents is the students miss seeing their teachers. The students miss having that connection with their teachers. So that's something that they're struggling with. And then others are struggling with the fact that they weren't able to do their musical, that they weren't able to do their spring concert, that they're not going to walk through graduation, that all of these things that they were looking forward to they've all of a sudden disappeared from them. So we have to recognize in this environment where everyone is scrambling, and I echo what everyone else has said about the noble efforts of our educators to completely transform what they are doing in 24 hours or less in many instances. It's really important to understand that the students' perception of where they are and what they're going through, that has to be first and foremost. Student well-being has to be at the front of the view. And what you're doing on the other stuff, you know, making them better in their playing and their practicing and other things, that's important to do too. But first and foremost, you have to address the social emotional aspect of what they're going through. You know, and Mary did hit on one thing that I think is really important to understand, is that we don't know the economic impact of this. So for example, I'm in New Jersey. Our governor announced that our fiscal year is now pushed off to October 1st for 3 months. They're also looking at a bill that will allow municipalities to delay payments to schools of tax payments. So all of a sudden that has a significant impact on what does the funding look like in the school, what kind of decisions then are people going to make. And we also don't know what our state budgets are going to look like. And as Mary said, it flows down from there. If there's less money from education coming from the state down to the school district, and then people are playing games with how school districts are getting their funding, our school boards and our superintendents are going to have some very hard decisions to make, and it's going to be very incumbent upon all of us to make sure that we are aware of that and that we are prepared for those challenges as they come forward. But the thing that is going to be, I think, the most transformational in this entire process is the role that social emotional learning it must play in music education and arts education when we come out on the other side of this. You know, when we emerge, as schools begin to roll in, and I believe we will roll back in September. I don't believe we'll all roll back in September. I think that what we're going to see is probably a rolling start to the school year as the effects of this particular pandemic, you know, make their way across the country. You know, we're on the front end here in New York and New Jersey. So we may, as we emerge, we'll be able to get back to normal, but I think that everyone's going to be emerging at different times, and that's going to dictate what happens to our schools. But the issue of embedding social emotional learning into our music programs and into our arts programs has got to be front and center of our work. It was an emerging issue before we got to this point in time, and it is now going to be an issue on steroids. And I say that this is important because of the fact that, you know, oftentimes as music advocates, we've talked about the fact that music education increases test scores, it keeps down on chronic absenteeism, it keeps our students in schools and allows them to graduate. These are all extrinsic values and they're important and should be shared. But when we start talking about things like creativity and innovation and how students feel and how they respond, the social emotional aspects of things, that's inherent in our arts courses. That's inherent in our music courses because arts education is social. You know, you look at our arts classes and our ensembles and they're putting on plays and our dance classes. It is a social activity. And all you have to do is listen to any song today to realize that arts is emotional, or look at a painting or react to something. And the fact that our entire nation is hunkered down in their homes, listening to music, watching creative works that they're streaming concerts, streaming plays. You know, the role that the arts play in our society has taken on a magnified role. And I think that only helps us when we come out of this process and begin to address what's happening with the arts in our schools. So I think that it's very important that, and I'm, you know, I could go into a whole deep discussion about social emotional learning, which I will save you on this call, but we just did a webinar on Monday night with Dr. Maurice Elias, who's the founding father of social emotional learning and character development, not only in the United States, but around the world, along with Scott Egger, who wrote a book on social emotional learning and music education, and myself talking about this transformation and what we can do to prepare for it and prepare ourselves for that transition. So you can find that information at the artsednewjersey.org. It's artsednj.org website. I would encourage you to go there and you can see that particular webinar that will take you way under the hood about what I'm talking about when it comes to arts education and social emotional learning. And I'll leave you with this, because Mary hit on this. We have to be what's ready for the other side. We are going to have some financial challenges. We don't know to what degree they're going to be, but they will be there. Advocacy is going to be needed more than ever. And that means that we have to be vigilant. It means that we have to be visible. And it also means that we have to be prepared. So now is the time as organizations to begin to think about, as we come out of this, make sure that we are armed and ready to go into battle to make sure that we are protecting our programs. And because if we do the work now to prepare for that, we are going to be much more successful when we emerge from this pandemic. So thank you all for the time and look forward to the conversation moving forward.
And Bob, thank you for your very well connected contribution there. I think you, Mary, and Henry have each come with very specific views because of your roles and the way that you engage in music and arts education and the way that we all gather to support. Super, super great to have you here. And next, and by the way, everyone, if you go to the chat tab here in the meeting, there's a good conversations happening, and all of our presenters will in fact share contact information there if they can stay after. I know, Mary, you have something coming up right at the next top of the hour, but I dropped a note in there. We'll collect any questions. We'll get to as many as we can, and we'll get you answers if our time runs up for the day. So next, we're going to go to Jeff Smith, who is the Executive Director for Arts in the Metro Nashville Public Schools. And I also know we have Frank Makos from Philadelphia, 2 school districts that the coalition works very closely with. And Jeff, I'm going to turn it over to you. And we're really interested in hearing what's happening in the district now and where you think things are going to be when we get to next school year, whenever your students can get back into to buildings and classrooms. So I'm going to turn it over to you. You there?
Thank you, Lee. Yes, and
Awesome.
and thank you, Mary, Henry, and Bob. It's great to join all of you on this panel discussion. We're really excited about this work. I am going to share just a few slides, so hopefully this present will work, and you all can see this. So, literally a few days before our schools closed in mid-March, the week before spring break, a few days before that, our schools closed due to the COVID virus. I was in one of our schools volunteering to lead a class with 5th grade general music students and do some drumming because we had just been impacted several days before by a major outbreak of tornadoes that devastated much of the Middle Tennessee community and destroyed parts of a few of our buildings. So we had a bit of a 1-2 punch here in Nashville when that happened and took place. But it's the incredible collaboration between the school teachers, the administrators, the families and students, the community, all of our many partners that have helped us navigate both the tornadoes and the COVID-19 outbreak. So a few of our students and teachers are featured in pictures in this slide. And I want to highlight for our district, we have an amazing collective impact model called Music Makes Us that was started in 2012. I think Lori Schell is on the call. She's the first executive director for that work. And many of those on the call have been partners in this work the entire time. And we're very grateful to be connected to the Grammy Music Education Coalition and have their investment and partnership in our work. I would say to highlight and stress the work of building and maintaining strong music programs that engage, educate, and motivate our music students must continue. It's incredibly important that we use this opportunity to leverage our resources to continue the talk, as Bob said earlier, about SEL connection for our music programs. In fact, we're in the process of finishing our strategic plan, a multi-year plan, and we've been working with Spark Impact on that and many of our partners to hear from them and our teachers. And before this even happened, a strong component to that is connecting to SEL and how the work in our music classrooms connects to shaping and supporting and nurturing social emotional learning for our students. But we can't forget about the social emotional for our teachers and all of our staff, administrators, and the families who have been impacted, because there's going to be a long-term effect on those who are struggling right now not to be able to connect with and to see their students and families. And I really think of our music programs and all the work going in our schools in any kind of music classroom, that it really is an extension of their family. And many students, for them to not only get, especially our students from low socioeconomic status, to get not only their meals, but to get so much of the support they need in education and life from our schools, and to not be able to have that face-to-face is, of course, a struggle, but presents a unique opportunity to try to bridge the digital divide that we still struggle with in this country, to provide more online resources and tools and ways of connecting students and teachers. And here in Nashville, many of our teachers are connecting with students and providing resources through Schoology, which is our online platform. We're working with many partners like Quaver Music and Music First, and all of the partners who are on this call to provide content to students and to families so that they can continue engaging in learning activities. Here in Metro Nashville Public Schools, we are providing all these activities as optional. We have not gone to the full online learning. As was mentioned earlier by Henry, there is a difference among districts in how they adopt that, but we are providing optional learning activities and also packets which get printed each Monday and are distributed through free meal sites at several schools. And each one of the grade bands in that packet includes a visual and performing arts activity for students. But we know that many of our students and teachers are really finding ways to engage creatively through online video conferencing and sharing of files and finding unique ways to connect during this time and to share the positive. And that's one of the great things about the work in music education is we have so many positive stories, and we really continue to be a force for good in promoting the collaboration between the community and our schools. Here in Nashville, we're very fortunate to have so many singer-songwriters, musicians, and music businesses and professionals throughout the community who all are standing up to say, what can we do? How can we help? How can we collaborate? And so we're very thankful and fortunate to have that. I think the piece that Bob mentioned about student individualization, personalization, and engaging them, it's incredibly important that we continue to make sure that students have a voice, that we focus on their agency and their ownership of their curriculum and their work. And this is, again, providing a unique opportunity, as I see some teachers encouraging students to create their own content and to curate the content online and to share it with others. I really see this reshaping the work that we do, a lot of the work that we do in music education. But as we know, for some students, they might not have access to laptops or digital equipment. Even with many internet providers providing free or low-cost internet, that can sometimes be a hindrance for families who might not have access to that and barriers, especially during the COVID outbreak with students not being able to access libraries in addition to schools and many public resources such as community centers to be able to access those opportunities and information. I'm going to highlight also some of our many investors, because in this work, it's about our investors and partners. In addition to these many investors, again, Quaver Music, Music First, our university partners, Nashville Symphony, Country Music Hall of Fame and Museum, Nashville Opera, Tennessee Performing Arts Center, all these partners coming together and saying, what can we do? How can we provide performances and content online? But as was said earlier in the chat box, all of that, those products and all the support they're providing have a cost. And so we need to make sure that we're supporting our cultural partners, our investors, all of the nonprofits and businesses who make this work happen. And here in Nashville, being in the music city and an entertainment capital, it's incredibly important that we continue to support local artists and arts organizations and be able to maintain that, because the teaching artists we bring into the schools and the work we do with those partners is incredibly important and enriches the work that our music teachers are doing with their students. So I'm really excited about how we continue to develop both music skills and the 21st century skills we know are built through participation in music education classes, and how we can move forward online learning and connecting with students and continue to develop these public-private partnerships as we try to return to normalcy, to try to get instruments back in the hands of our students, to get them back into classrooms in the future when it's safe to do so, and to again make sure that we're continuing to provide the highest quality music education possible and removing any barriers to equitable access to music programs of excellence for our students.
That was terrific, Jeff. Thank you so much for sharing and participating. To all four of the panelists, what wonderful and very focused and poignant remarks today. Everyone, if you like, we can take questions. There is a chat tab there. Feel free to drop them in. I'm keeping an eye. And one of the things I'd like to do now is, Henry, if I can just put you on the spot for a minute. Given the work that you and the Save the Music Foundation do in schools, based on what you heard from the other panelists, and particularly Jeff, since he's managing a significant number of students and art students and music students in the Nashville schools, anything you'd like to expand on, or something that you'd ask Jeff that you didn't hear in his remarks that you'd like to know or share with everybody else? And then Bob, I'll come to you.
Oh, I get to be put on the spot, and then I get to put Jeff on the spot, I guess. Yeah, I mean, I think, and it's, I'm actually doing another webinar tomorrow where I'm the music and arts representative on an ed tech, discussion with like a reading person and a math person, I guess. But I'm really curious, Jeff, in terms of the elementary school learning. Like, we've seen a lot of demand in the past 2 school years for our elementary music grant in ORF training and things that are about music and movement and rhythm and all those things. I'm just curious about how that is, how you're seeing that and how you're managing that sort of in the new remote learning environment.
Yes, actually, it's interesting you bring that up, because our elementary music coach, Franklin Willis, is going to be part of a discussion presentation on dancing virtually and incorporating movement in the home with your students. I think it's incredibly important to make sure that we continue to develop opportunities. And one of the things that we're trying to think about for the future is some way of making instruments for all more accessible, and finding a way not only to get instruments into our schools, which we've been able to do with our many partners, but to get them into the homes. You know, I think back to years ago when every home had a piano in it or instruments, and that was everyone gathered around the piano and they would sing and make music together. So I think just finding creative ways of getting opportunities and instruments and resources to families so they feel empowered to support the learning at home, in addition to continuing music education in our schools. Our teachers are, many of them are curating Facebook Live events through their PTOs in their schools for our elementary music teachers. And again, they're connecting through Quaver Music and providing all those terrific online resources. So they're finding ways to connect with them. I know of some students and families who are having private lessons in strings or other musical instruments, and finding ways to connect with students. And I think the ensemble webinar that's coming up for the NAMM Foundation will be fantastic, because many of our teachers are very curious and have questions about how that might work. But for our elementary families who have elementary students, I think the big thing also is equipping them, because they're working full time. And if you have a 5 or 6 year old at home, as a parent of 3 kids myself, it is incredibly challenging to try to make sure they're staying engaged and learning while you're also trying to work your full-time job remotely. So I think this is a new normal, but going to the next normal and providing resources so that when something like this might occur and we're in a crisis, or quite honestly at any point, they have the resources they need to support the work of their children.
Fantastic. Thank you for those comments, Henry, and for stoking up the conversation, and Jeff. Bob Morrison next, and then David Sears from the Grammy Museum. Bob, any questions or things that came up in your mind as you were listening to Jeff and how the Nashville district is approaching the work, or things you'd like to suggest to Jeff in terms of, you know, his transition into, and the districts into next year, and when things sort of get back to normal, or whatever that will be?
Well, I mean, I certainly feel that, you know, Jeff's got a good handle on, you know, as much as he can know at this point in time, as much as any of us can know at this point in time. I think that one of the real challenges that he hit on is the disparity of what is happening with student access to technology. I think the technology gap, the Wi-Fi gap, has been really brought to the forefront in all of this. But I think and Marcia, you know, kind of hinted at this in her comment, you know, regarding the issue of recruitment and retention. We've lost that element in this spring. You know, our schools let out before spring has come into place. So I think that there's going to need to be some inventive thinking around how do we do recruitment and retention when we don't have access to the students, when there's concern over, sharing of instruments and some of the sanitation issues that I know folks have been working on and actually been writing up some really good work on. So I think the hurdle that's right in front of us is going to be the recruiting and retention one.
Thanks, Bob. Makes really good sense. Next, I got a comment in the chat stream here from our good friend David Sears at the Grammy Museum, who's very active in the Grammy Museum's education programming. And David, are you there? I know you have a comment that you'd like to share based on the conversation so far.
Yes, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Great.
Yeah,
Good
no,
to see you.
I was actually just responding to Marcia's comments about retention and as well as Bob's comments about retention. I think that's something that we really need to talk about and perhaps together with a small group of us come up with a game plan as to how we can help in that regard.
Yep, that's great. Great suggestion. And I think one of the things we can do is to help to gather around that. We will, as the coalition, continue this programming. Expect another town hall next week. The content will vary in those who present, and we'll be giving you a broader schedule of that. We rushed to put this together, so I'm so grateful for everyone who's contributed today. And Bob Morrison, I got your message. I know you've got one more comment to make, and then I'm going to move to close and just point folks to some resources. Go ahead, Bob.
So I just wanted to kind of bring everyone's attention to the fact that there are a group of students that are working on a worldwide day of gratitude scheduled for April the 30th, using the hashtags Lean on Us and Day of Gratitude. And it's a way to express gratitude for the first responders and the frontline health care workers and all those that are risking their lives during the COVID-19 pandemic by unifying around the song Lean on Me. And they're working on lesson plans and other ways for folks to engage. Hal Leonard Publishing is behind it by providing the licensing and the resources for the music so they can get this out there. So they will be announcing this events and activities on Monday. So stay tuned for that. And we want to get as many organizations and schools and teachers and individuals participating as possible.
Fantastic, Bob. And Mary Luehrsen, I see that you have another comment to make before we close. Are you there?
Wonderful discussion, and thank you again. I just think it's important that all of us help music teachers create logs or create descriptions of what they've been doing in this time period, so they can go back and describe it to their school administrators. School administrators are overwhelmed with the infrastructure for all the teaching and all the learning that has to take place. And I think music teachers need to be supported to, be able to go back or in an ongoing way to describe what they're doing. So that, again, the support for their important work. When we did our first webinar, we encouraged, we addressed the technical divide, and we said, phone calls are as important too to students, and to keep a logbook of what you're doing and to write down what you're doing so you can go back and describe the work that you've been doing with students during this time. So all new things for everyone to have to do at the same time as they're doing such great work. So thanks,
Thank
Lee.
you, Mary. So our most sincere appreciation and gratitude, Mary, Jeff, Bob, and Henry. Wonderful way to kick off this series. And I've mentioned I'll let our audience know I've mentioned to each of our speakers to turn this around quickly and to respond with everything else that's going on. It's just so fantastic. And thank you. We will release an archive of this. We've been capturing video as we've gone on. And I will mention this before we close. So we'll do another one of these next week at the same time and place. And also a couple of quick housekeeping things. The resources that were talked about here, and there are posts from all the speakers or our panelists' organizations at GrammyMusicEd.org /resources where, for instance, Henry and Save the Music Foundation has this awesome teaching resource. Quadrant Arts Education, NAMM and the webinars that Mary's hosting. There's information about how to get to that stuff and a lot more from the affiliates in the organization. So please do go and check that out. If you want to be kept up to date on the regular schedule as we build out, because each week there's a couple things that happen, just go to GrammyMusicEd.org. If you fill out the form and provide us your email if you're willing, you will get an update from us every Tuesday about the programming for the next couple of weeks. And last for now, we're going to start something else fun tomorrow, a series of master classes or lessons with Grammy Music Education Coalition artist ambassadors tomorrow. And you can take a look at our Instagram feed or Facebook feed for Grammy Music Education Coalition. An artist ambassador who's a wonderful young cellist, Sofia Basilar, will on Instagram Live to start. Have a conversation with a pianist with which she works from the West Coast, Laura Downs. And after they talk on Instagram Live, we with Dolby On will stream performances from one or both of them to our Facebook page. And that's content that's great for your students. So if you're sharing things for students to do during the day or during the week, we will archive these, but if they want to come on live tomorrow and have a conversation with Sophia and Laura on Instagram Live, they can do it. So thanks again to everyone who participated today from the Grammy Music Education Coalition, our 70+ affiliates, everyone here and who participated today. Stay safe. We're so pleased you could make it. And email us. We'll leave the chat room open for a little bit if you want to have conversations. I gave some email addresses in there you can connect with. And thank you. Stay safe this week, and hopefully we'll catch you again tomorrow or next week, whatever works for you. Thank you.
Thanks.